there's a lot to pack on the data front, but we touched on the basics. What are these basics? Where can we go from here? And I can't reiterate that enough. Where we don't have this basics done, then we're not getting to the level that I'm probably insinuating, especially with multiple locations. And if you're bad at your scorecard and you're bad with numbers, do not open multiple locations either. I'm tracking the money. I'm tracking where we're currently at. I'm tracking what we need to get to.
I would just track it consistently. So I just think starting at the most basic, if we're tracking money, you can do it daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it monthly. I just think it's important to track it. I think that should definitely be on your scorecard.
If you guys are not tracking your basic like sales funnel numbers, your leads, your bookings, your shows, your closes, and then your conversion from those closes, sometimes into front end offers, sometimes into members, into eventual members, then everything is a guess. What is happening, beautiful people? Welcome to another episode of the Build Your Gympire podcast. You're in the right place if you are a gym owner, personal trainer, box owner that is looking to grow your gym, grow your business in ways that you, your team, your community, the people you serve, and not least importantly, your bank account are going to feel absolutely awesome about. Today, we're all competitive people. We like to, when we play games, we like to win. And how do you know if you're winning? Mark and Connor?
Keep score, GR. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, keep fucking score. I love my cheesy intro. So today we're going to talk about basically the essential numbers that you as a gym owner, personal trainer, etc., need to know. We're going to work from the basics. Hey, I've been running my business with basically no numbers whatsoever, no ideas on the data. I'm just serving people. I'm signing up people when they come in. Mark, Connor, where do I start in terms of the numbers that I should be tracking to start to grow into a more adult business? What's that look like for you guys?
All right. So I would say as you are getting into business and you're starting to keep score, you want at the most basic level, probably just track. I think some people get a little out of hand with how much they're tracking, especially early on. If you are a newer business, let's just say either a single operator or you have a couple team members, I would track basic things. So we want to know how many leads are coming in the door, right? We want to know how many either whatever you're running, a consultation, starting point session, free trial, whatever. So we want to know how many of those leads we're getting that are coming through the door to opt in and commit to whatever our front end offer is. Then from there, we want to have an understanding of how many people that we are converting of those free front end offers into an whatever our membership is, whether it's an annual membership. We want to know how many actual clients, paid clients we're getting. And then one other thing I would probably say to round that out would be maybe to track cancellations so we can just see our attrition rate. I think those four basic things would be a great starting point for a lot of businesses. As you get going and you become more of a mature business, you can start adding things in like we tracked. We want to try to push actions. So we will track how many actual calls that we're doing, how many reactivations we're doing, just things like that to actually elicit an action by our GMs.
So just to recap it, in your opinion, right? We want to track the total number of leads. So leads, these would be opportunities, right? So if you're a more advanced gym owner, then like, hey, let's speed through this part at 2.5x speed or 3x or whatever it is. But if you're just starting out, right, leads would be any opportunities. So if you've got referrals, if you got folks that are reaching out, whatever it is, you're going to track your number of leads. Then Connor, I think you said you wanted to track the number of folks that book, right, for that initial consultation, starting point, assessment, whatever it is you're calling that thing. I'm not going to get into the marketer speak of why I don't love the word assessment. We'll leave that alone for now. And then of the folks that show up to that appointment, we want to know how many buy, because that's going to give us your close rate. How well are you actually selling people once they do get into your universe? And then if you're selling some sort of front end offer, you're not selling anybody into a membership right away. Not to say you can't do that, right? But if you are selling a front end offer, what percentage of those folks that take your front end offer then become paying clients at your sort of right standard price, right? So your basic, that's what we would call our sales funnel numbers, right, at its most basic level. And then also, I'm with you. So I had on my notes that we absolutely need to be tracking churn percentage from the beginning. And churn, just for those of you guys that don't know, if you have 10 clients and you lost one, you would take the number of clients lost during that period, you would divide it by the total number of clients in that period, and you get a churn rate, right? So that would be a 10% churn, meaning you lose 10% of your members every single month, right? If that number is sort of held throughout the I guess throughout the months, right? As you're operating your business. Mark, any additional thoughts on the basics? We'll start there.
Yeah, to build off that, I totally agree. Like at the end of the day, though, it's the business. We got to focus on our money. How much money have we collected this month, regardless of your billing schedule? But what's our current money? How much more upcoming money is coming in the door? Um, as we start to track a lot of these things, that's what keeps us going. And some of these other metrics could be off, but if our money's right, then business is probably okay and pretty good. Um, and I think that's one of the most important things where we get distracted in tracking a lot of this. And what I would rather have, what I tell my team is really, it's almost like scoreboard 2.0 because we reflect everything back to our projections. So, which beginner or advanced, I can't recommend doing this enough of taking time and actually basically filling out what your money should look like this month, next month, the upcoming quarter, whatever it is, even annually as we come down to the filming of this podcast, coming down to the end of the year here. But what would I want our scoreboard to say, right? What am I trying to achieve? Because then that will help me dictate some of our scoreboard metrics. But the way I look at it to our team is the power of the scoreboard is right. We can adjust. We can make a halftime adjustment. We can make a quarter adjustment, whatever it is. But if we don't know where we're going, if we haven't made those annual projections of what's possible and compare it against that, then what are we really trying to track? I don't like tracking numbers just for the sake of tracking. You know, I'm a huge data nerd for sure. But we got to know what the goal is in mind. So kind of a loaded comment there, a lot to unpack, which we can do as well. One more thing before I let you guys take that and dissect it is just a pro tip of the cadence of reporting. When is this report due? How do we define certain metrics? Especially as you start to have maybe multiple facilities or multiple people tracking this. You can do it one facility, maybe you hand it off the reporting. What are those confines? What's the cadence? If I'm the owner, when do I want to see these numbers presented to me? What software we're using? Like it is. I can see why people get in the weeds with it. It's always not a fun thing to discuss. Totally understand why people don't do it, but we have to overcome some of those friction points because we're big boys, we're business owners. We got to track this stuff. This is the stuff that matters. We're not just training nerds and all this stuff. We want to keep training and helping people. Then we got to make sure our business is solid.
So there's a ton to dissect with what both of you said already, but I do want to touch, Mark, on you said tracking the money. So at the most basic level, right? I'm not talking about getting deep into the weeds on what you think of as is it just for 4 locations and fifth and maybe sixth coming next year. So we're not talking about the 4 location advanced finance documentation, et cetera. If you're just starting out, what does tracking the money mean to you?
For me, again, I go back to those projections, which I did not do this early on, and I learned the hard way. Because now you're more reactive. You're just like, oh, this is more than I figured. This is great. Rather than once I started pausing, I'm like, yeah, that's what we should kind of be doing. If we're growing at this rate, then we should be doing this. This is what this equates to dollar wise. So now I'm not surprised, right? But tracking the money for me more day to day is what is on our recurring billing, right? I don't care if you bill weekly, every 28 days, first of the month, whatever one you do, then it's like, where are we currently at? So for us, we still bill on the first of the month. So on that third or the fourth of the month, we know exactly where we're at. We know what's unpaid, what should we already have collected, but also then we look at our projections line by line. And when I say line by line, I mean like, what are your service offerings? So if you're offering, small group, large group, one-on-one, each one of those should kind of have a metric that what we're shooting for. And I want to know how much have we collected so far of that. So I know what we need to go for, and helps to really dictate our decisions. So if I know I need an extra $500 on one-on-one revenue, then what plays am I going to run to go achieve that? Right. If I know I need an extra $3,000 in small group memberships, well, great. Well, how many leads do I need at our current close percentage to go and do that? So we can figure out what plays to run. Otherwise, we're just going to throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks and not have that guidance of what we're actually trying to achieve. And is it realistic? Certain months out of my year is different than, our high months are way different than our lower months. So that was really eye-opening to me without getting too into the weeds when starting to coach up some team members or leaders and they're all demoralized because we can't hit certain metrics. And it's like, yeah, maybe they were a little off. They were a little unrealistic given the trends from the years prior. So there's a lot to pack on the data front, but we kind of touched on the basics. And now, all right, what are these basics? Where can we go from here? And I can't reiterate that enough. Where we don't have this basics done, then we're not getting to the level that I'm probably insinuating, especially with multiple locations. And if you're bad at your scorecard and you're bad with numbers, do not open multiple locations either. I'll have that as a preference
Yeah,
as well, but a little preface there. But yeah, I'm tracking the money. I'm tracking where we're currently at. I'm tracking what we need to get to.
Gotcha. And so, Connor, you got anything to add to that on the financial side? Like if you were just starting off, would you look at, I haven't heard the word P&L yet, right? Mark sounds like he's tracking the MRR and the receivables. MRR for the rookies would be monthly recurring revenue, right? So most of us in the gym business are going to have a level of recurring revenue that we want to hit. Probably the way that most of us bill. Connor, additional thoughts there?
Yeah, I would just track it consistently. What I'm worried about is if you're not tracking anything right now and you're hearing all this stuff, it's like it sounds such like a huge mountain to climb, and it sounds so complex that it's like, shit, you know what? I can't do any of that. I can't do all of that. So why do any of it? So I just think starting at the most basic, if we're tracking money, let's just track money, like revenue coming in. You can do it daily, you can do it weekly, you can do it monthly. I just think it's important to track it. I think that should definitely be on your scorecard. Some of the projections that Mark is talking about, especially if you're somewhat of a hybrid business where you're training athletes, you're going to have peak seasons. Like you're going to have high months as those athletes go into season. It will become a low month. And if you're not tracking that, the following year, you may not expect it when that low month comes. So if you are tracking it on a consistent basis, you can start to do some of the projections that Mark is talking about to understand when the trends are coming, to understand when, hey, I know that this group is leaving, so I got to put my foot on the gas and start hitting up some of these other different marketing plays to start kind of backfilling that. If you're not tracking anything, it's really tough to understand trends. It's really tough to start doing some of those projections. So just at the most basic level, if you're not doing anything, I think hitting 4 or 5 metrics, including revenue coming in, would be super, super helpful.
Yeah, I'm with you. Being in the marketing, right? So obviously started as a gym owner and owned a handful over the years, and then being in the marketing space now, dude. If you guys are not tracking your basic like sales funnel numbers, so the first things that Connor said, right? Your leads, your bookings. Ideally, you're tracking shows too, your shows, your closes, and then your conversion from those closes, sometimes into front end offers, sometimes into members, into eventual members. Then everything is a guess. So it's one of the more, I guess, sort of, it can be a frustrating thing if folks are not tracking their scoreboard, because what happens is you make decisions based on emotion, and you make decisions based on sometimes your ego and what you may believe or not believe to be true. So you may think, oh my gosh, Mr. Marketing Agency guy, you just put them in front of me, I'm going to close them. And it turns out, right, if we look at your data, if you're only closing 20% of people to buy your $99 front end offer, right, the 20% of the people that come in and sit down with you to buy your $99 or $49, whatever is like super cheap thing, like turns out you actually suck at sales. But the only way for us to know that and to know where the most sort of profitable investment in particularly time and energy, right, when you're starting off, is to know what those numbers are. So if you have a huge issue with no shows, but you're closing everybody, it doesn't make sense for you guys to work on being a better closer, right? It makes sense to go solve where the data tells you the actual problem is, right? And unfortunately, you cannot do that without actually tracking the basic numbers on the scoreboard. And I'm just like, I was thinking back, because this stuff can be super intimidating, right? Oh man, they're talking about all these things. Do I need some sort of software? Do I need a crazy spreadsheet? I hate spreadsheets. I can't deal with numbers. Dude, I used to do this. It's like just like blast from the past. My first scoreboard was a whiteboard in my office where I did tally marks every time somebody showed up. Like that was it. And you got to see like, okay, we were pretty good at sales, so we probably closed everybody, but and maybe all the other numbers are good. We just need more leads. Well, great. Like, let's figure out how to go get more leads, spend more on marketing, whatever it is. But it can be super stinking basic. And I've seen some really, really advanced businesses that are running things in a really, really basic fashion. The difference, whether they're using a software or doing something basic or whatever it is that they're actually tracking it consistently. And I think that's sort of where we've got to be careful. Like, everyone listening is a health and fitness coach, right? In some way. What do you tell your clients that think like, oh, if I can't, train 18 hours a day and carry around, 2-gallon jugs of water and, jab myself with 18, whatever the fuck grams of trin every day and whatever, like there's no reason for me to even start doing any sort of fitness routine whatsoever. Right. We would all understand that that's a fucking insane belief to take on. And so this is the same thing with your data. Well, if I can't have a software that tracks everything and tracks down to every single layer of this, that, and the other, then it doesn't make sense for me. No, you could start as basic as starting to go for a walk and not having 12 beers a day, right? Miss Sally Johnson, like that'll be, no offense to any real Sally Johnson out there. Like that would be an improvement in your current situation. So if you're not tracking everything, tracking the very, very basic numbers would be a pretty strong improvement in your current basic situation. In terms of cadence, do you guys have a recommended cadence in terms of reviewing these numbers just on a basic level? We're thinking about the gym owner, independent trainer who's kind of starting off. What would you recommend on that front?
Every week, money every week, sales pipeline every week. Bigger, we didn't talk about defense. We didn't talk about expenses yet, but expenses could be more monthly. If I'm really toeing the line, then I'm looking at my expenditures probably every day, every other day. Depends on what stage you're in. But yeah, 100% every week. Like this is the thing that if we want to peel back why most people don't do this, it's because it can be uncomfortable being held accountable, right? We're the boss. We're the owner. Who's holding us accountable? The data has to hold us accountable. And so if we're not also doing a great bang up job, maybe on the sales front, we don't want to necessarily have that thrown in our face every single week. But guess what? If you want to be successful and want to have this be more of a benefit rather than a pebble in your shoe all the time, change your mindset around it and start to embrace some of the stuff that we're throwing out there for sure. Here's something else. So I was just talking with Jim owner the other week, and he's overwhelmed in the number side of things and all that, but he's doing a lot of the sales himself and he likes tracking the sales. But when it came to any other metrics, he was head in the sand.
Yeah.
And I was like, why don't you just, and again, I'm like, who's doing your books? What's going on? And he was like, well, I'm doing all that. I'm like, you realize like, well, my account was too expensive. Like your accountant shouldn't be doing your books. A bookkeeper should be doing your books. And there's people out there that do this for maybe 150, 300 bucks a month. Like, and if like, well, I don't know what spreadsheet to use. They do. They'll give you the spreadsheet. They can formulate it into whatever visual you seems best. But the best thing about that, to be a great investment, which is, I give credit my upbringing to this. I had the same thing happen. And they're like, well, you want to look at it this way? You want to look at it this way? And many different iterations or whatever it was. But the power in that was now somebody else is holding me accountable. Hey, get that in there. Hey, let's review this. Hey, how do you want that this month? And that in turn was the power, was that extra layer of accountability.
I like it. P.S. If you guys want a free copy of a scoreboard tool that we've used in the past, very simple spreadsheet with a video walkthrough of how to use it, reach out somewhere, comment on Instagram, DM us at Build Your Gympire, and we'll send you a free copy as a gift to help you along your initial journey as a gym owner, trainer, etc., a professional in this industry. So do we feel okay about the current, like the basics if we're starting off, right? So we need to look at the money. I want to look at the money coming in. I'm probably monthly looking at the money going out. If I'm really, as you said, toeing the line, like if I'm really close on my expenses, like I'm about to overdraft, I'm probably looking at that with a little bit higher frequency. And then sales funnel data, I'm looking at that on a weekly basis, right? I'm setting a meeting, even if you're a team of one. I think one of the most valuable things for me, even when I was starting this business, was like, I had my weekly level 10, like a weekly meeting with myself, where you review the scoreboard. I'd encourage you to set a time in your calendar to review your numbers and have a meeting with yourself, and maybe ask yourself, hey, if, you had 3 super handsome devils that were reviewing your scoreboard with you, what might they say about your current data? And sometimes that can be a nice frame to take and help you make some better decisions with your business. So you're looking at those things on a weekly basis. Do we feel good about that? Like, is it time to maybe look at the next phase, right? So what are the more advanced iterations of tracking that you guys have seen useful?
Yeah, I guess to build on that one more time too, because speaking to gym owners, like I think most gym owners are pretty competitive people. And if you're not tracking this, you don't know what a win looks like. And if you don't know what a win looks like, then what's going to keep the motivation really going, right? Otherwise, we're just going through week by week, going through the motions. And then if the business doesn't go the way we want, we think we deserve a participation trophy because we're trying really hard. And instead, I want to look at the data. I want to know what a win looks like. And quite frankly, set a goal for myself. And if I hit that goal, then reward yourself. Be good. There's always another day. There's always another sales call. There's always another session. So you got to have this mindset of like, hey, I'm winning. I'm going to treat myself, or hey, I'm on the next level, or I'm doing this. I'm hitting my goals. Let's write another bigger one. And starting off like that is exactly the mindset you need to make it in this game for the long haul. And it comes down to that scoreboard, that accountability, but having the right mindset or behind it. So I think that's super important to reiterate before we start talking about more advanced tracking tactics. Just wanted to add that in there first.
Good reminder. So that said, let's talk about the fancy stuff. Is there fancy stuff, Connor? What do you think? What are the additional layers that you would look at as somebody who's, really starting to put some gas on the fire in terms of growth?
You can look at kind of each subset of what we talked about. So if we're talking about leads, we want to talk about how many calls we're making to those leads, how many schedulings how many shows we're getting, how many no shows we're getting. We want to track closes. So we track, it's a little bit complicated. A close for us is different than a sign up. So we want to know when that close is happening. If they're closing directly out of our first front end offer, if we're having to downsell to a trial, free paid trial or something like that, and they're closing on a different week. We do holds. We're super flexible. Probably there's a different word that we should use instead of flexible for our holds, but we track holds under 2 weeks, and we also track extended holds, so over 2 weeks. We track reactivations, we track referrals, we track reviews, things like that.
I like it. Mark, what you got?
Again, talking with other gym owners, and I look at their P&Ls and it says income. And I'm like, where's this income coming from? This is maybe someone who trains athletes and adults, for instance. And they say, oh, like, do you know your split? And like, I don't really know. It's kind of like this. I'm like, well, if you're not, this is literally these are literally numbers and dollar amounts. Like there's a specific amount. It's not like based off what you feel. So like, what is it? And they're like, well, I don't really know. All right, well, if we don't know, how can we really guide on this? So we split out every income line item. So if we say athletes, it's like, well, how many are high school? How many are youth? How many are college? How much is one-on-one, small group, whatever else it is, like breaking that out,
Mark's frozen again. Mark's frozen. Would you like to interrupt his ass until his fucking
all your
internet
different
gets back?
options so we can
Are you back now?
That's weird because you never froze, GR, at all. I just kept talking and you were still live. So
Because my internet's fantastic.
I'm saying when I freeze, everyone else freezes. Son of a bitch. When do I stop?
I don't know. Looking at different line items for your different service areas and things like that. And I was going to very rudely interrupt and say, P.S. Rookie personal trainer, gym owner that is considering like building out your model. If you're listening to all the shit Mark is saying, this may be an argument for simplicity, right? Because if you do want to grow this more advanced business that services all these different service areas, and that sounds super fucking overwhelming to you, you may consider going the Connor route where it's like, Connor's talking about all these different lead sources and whatnot, but it is all guiding into one service area, right? It's one essentially offering that they have. There are lots of different ways to win, and you can win obviously motherfucking huge like Mark has in a more complex facility, but it does take more. And it's not just the different service areas and things like that. Like if you're going to grow those things intelligently, you need to know what the numbers are for those various, service categories and things of that nature. So good point.
100%, 100%. And then I'll go, if we're going to drill down line by line, then I think maybe it's better to do that on the expense front, because especially as you grow, or especially as you add team members, and heaven forbid somebody else maybe start swiping your credit card, being able to track where's my money going? Am I frozen?
No, you're good, man.
Yeah. Why are you making faces? Why are you stopping?
Well, you were in and out.
Yeah, it was like,
you were in and out,
and you barely stayed on. You were tiptoeing that sideline. You barely.
And then every once in a while, it sounds like you fast forward yourself to try to get through. It's like in the middle.
Well, that's.
Are you good, Mark? Another couple things that we like to track, especially I think one of the main things that we look at when we're working with gym owners is their schedule, right? And is their schedule, a lot of people's schedules are overinflated, like completely, where you're burning a lot of cash because you're keeping things on your schedule that the utilization rate is so small, and your payroll is the exact same. So you're increasing payroll expenses because you have an overinflated schedule. So one of the things that definitely I think is important to track is utilization rate. So your session utilization rate. So let's just say you do small group personal training. So your max, let's just say, is 6 people per session at 7 a.m. for the month. What did that 7 a.m. sessions average? Let's just say it's 2 out of 6. Maybe we should look at, if that does that over a period of 3 months, maybe we should look at possibly canceling that session or closing it out, or doing something proactively and on the offense of trying to drive people into that session. But if you don't know how many people are coming to each session, let's just say, hey, I have 100 people, like I offer 10 sessions a day, I'm great, but if you really look at it with a I was about to say microphone, but it's a mic. Why can I not think of that? Microscope. That's what it is. Yeah, look at it with a microphone, and no, look at it with a microscope, and you'll realize that, like, hey, I have 4 sessions out of my day, out of my schedule, that are packed, and the other 6 sessions are dead. There's multiple ways to grow your business. Yeah, we can grow top line revenue, but we can also decrease needed expenses. And some of those sessions that you have on your schedule are completely unneeded. So utilization rate, definitely one of them.
I love that too, because we're going even more advanced. You got to be able, I've done this with managers, and teaching them how to run a gym and run a facility and manage a schedule is really everything. And how do I raise their IQ with that? But by taking this principle, exactly what Connor said, that it's like, well, what's the metric? What's the cutoff? What raises my eyebrows when it's like, hey, if it's like this for 3 months in a row, you need to make a decision, or it becomes an issue and we need to discuss and problem solve the issue. But it also gives them freedom, where if they notice a lower attended hour during the day, they're not going to freak out and wonder. So I gave them the freedom to say, hey, we're going to discuss this if it's, after 8 weeks, if it's like this, or 12 weeks, or every quarter, when we pull this is when we're going to do this, and I think that's somebody that is like, well, how do you manage all these facilities and all these different schedules and everything else? Just because by tracking the data over time, starting very basic, and as you grow, you're going to need more data. Then you eventually grow into it, and you develop that skill set as your business matures. But you also mature as a leader and as an owner, and your systems evolve and your systems mature. But it all goes back to those fundamentals and those basics as well. But determining those parameters or those trigger points for the data is an advanced technique as you start to have team members and grow and have a little bit bigger operation.
And I should say, again, we're saying start basic, start at your most basic level. If you're doing nothing, start something, start with those 4 basic things that we talked about. The utilization rate, it sounds like it's complex, but if you're using some type of scheduling software, some type of like, whatever it is, those are pretty easy to pull reports from. That's something that's easy that you can go each month. That should probably not be weekly, should probably be monthly.
Yeah.
So that you can see the whole picture, but that's pretty easy to be pulling from. And with the scorecard that we're saying, hey, become a pro with this, don't be an amateur. I should also say, don't be an amateur and just be a free for all and let people show up to whatever the hell they want. They need, like, that's outside of this, but people need to be scheduling and they need to be like set into certain things. You can't just allow people to show up and be a free for all. I know that's outside of scorecard, but if you're doing that, it's going to be really tough to track certain metrics that are going to help you as your business matures.
Essentially, you need to be tracking attendance for,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
in a group fitness setting, you need to be tracking attendance for your various groups so that you can actually look at, hey, this was a low attending session. Turns out if we talk to the 2 members that attend that session, that they would totally switch to another time slot, make everything more profitable, cut some payroll a little bit, right? And everything, including your P&L, is happier. Your members are still sticking around. Everything's good. You know what I mean? Like, there's some really good positives there.
It allows you to make decisions, just like everything we're talking about, like with the scorecard. It allows you to make decisions. There's so many gym owners that we talk to, like, hey, we're bursting at the seams, but when we actually look at the, like, oh, I'm thinking about opening another location or opening up more time slots or doing this or expanding, leaving my current location and moving, like, just keeping one location and expanding into a bigger location. But when we dive into their actual schedule, we're not bursting at the seams. Like, there's a lot more meat on the bone that we could chew off before we go and make big decisions and take on more expenses and make moves that we're probably not ready for. And if we're not tracking basic things and tracking things like attendance and all that stuff, it makes those decisions really unclear when they could be pretty clear.
And one more thing too, if you're somebody who stresses out about money and, oh, I need to increase my revenue, I got to do this different thing. Tracking this scorecard is tracking this usage rate, like Connor is saying. It's like, well, if I have 3 more spots at every one of my sessions, I have X many more spots a month. I could sell X many more people that train, 2 times a month, or sorry, 8 times a month. Like, I could fit 15 more members in here at an average price point of whatever, $250, $300, whatever your price point is. Like, holy cow, I'm sitting on 10 grand extra per month that I could do. Like, all I need to do is fill out the schedule a little bit more. All right, that's all I good. Now I have my clarity and my goal and I'm trying to achieve. Now let's go figure out how to do it rather than try to think of all these different revenue streams and we should track this and sell this. It's like we have to discipline our mind, get focused, and that's exactly what the data allows us to do.
Wait, so does it then become a marketing problem? I happen to know somebody who solves marketing problems for gyms. Insert gymmembermachine.com. Woo! Yeah, you do that and you tell us you came from the podcast, man, we might hook you up with a stinking deal, guys. Gymmembermachine.com, shameless fucking plug. Let's roll. Because if you got a marketing problem, we can solve that shit. Thank you, Mark, for that very deeply planned segue. So other data, other things that I have not heard mentioned yet that I like to look at. I've heard it called ARM, so your average revenue per member. So as you're getting more advanced, I would love for you to be able to track and have a handle on that and attempt to improve that. Maybe not on a monthly basis necessarily, but certainly I think on a quarterly and definitely an annual basis, improve your annual or your gosh damn, your average revenue per member. How do I get that number, GR? You divide your total gross sales by your total number of, I guess you can call it clients or members, right? You would include, I think, your FEO in that data, but that gives you an idea of what you are pulling from each member every single month. We've already mentioned the monthly P&L and or just the P&L in general, looking at that. I'd also look at, like, we haven't mentioned your margins, right? Which I think is potentially implied, but at the risk of, I guess, I don't like to leave things implied because a lot of times folks don't pick up the things that are implied. Like I would absolutely be fucking looking at your profit margins on a month-to-month basis. And when I say looking at your profit margins, I would track your profit margins after accounting for paying yourself a reasonable salary. Because if you say, oh, my profit margins are great, they're 50%, and you haven't paid yourself in a year, like that's not a 50% margin, right? That could be as low as fucking zero. And so I definitely be looking at your profit margin after accounting for a reasonable salary for you as an owner. I think if we're talking to more advanced folks, I'm not necessarily saying you count all of your compensation, because not all of the compensation that you take out of the business will be necessarily a reasonable salary that it would take to replace you with. But I'd definitely be tracking your margins on a monthly basis is where I look at it. I like tracking the ARM. I like looking at the churn and referral percentage. I think I don't necessarily agree with everything the guy's done, but I want to say it's a Hormozy thing. Try to give credit where credit's due. Looking at the referral over churn percentage ratio. So if you've got a higher percent referral rate than you have in comparison to your churn. So if 6% of your members refer you somebody every single month and your churn is 3%, like you're gonna fucking grow, even if you never work with some awesome marketing agency like us, right? Like you're just gonna have organic growth over time, which is super nice, right? We've been fortunate enough to experience that in the agency, which is why we don't fucking advertise it all the time. So I like tracking that golden ratio as well. And there's a whole this data stuff. If you haven't picked up on it already, dear listener, the data stuff is it can be such a giant monster. We haven't even started to talk about customer feedback stuff. I think what would be good is potentially bringing on James. James Pratt owns a fucking legendary gym in New Jersey. He did a great talk at our last mastermind meeting and members retreat about feedback systems and feedback scores. He is maybe the definition of advanced and potentially overkill for 95% of where most gym owners are at. But I do think that getting into customer feedback scores and things of that nature can be, super valuable as a data point for you and your business. There's certainly things like if your churn percentage is unhealthy, then getting that feedback can be a deeply important thing. What else are we missing, guys? I think we've hit on a good chunk of basics. We've hit on some nice to haves and maybe some more advanced things. Obviously, we mentioned breaking things down as you get more advanced by lead source and not just overall leads. What are we missing here?
More advanced. I'm definitely tracking how long some length of stay, right, for every member. I'm also getting more advanced. I'm tracking length of stay for employees too, and not reading into that too much, just because it's not just a long-term world. Like longer is not always better with that, but that's an interesting thing to start to plan for as you start to scale of like, hey, when do we have to kind of have that touch point? The same thing on it's a client. We know our clients are leaving after 10 months, then that drop off, that conversation needs to start happening in month 7, and we need to put things in, systematize things in our business to account for that. And we wouldn't know that without the data, right? Going back to staffing and payroll, got to have that payroll number finite, right? I know Connor and other guys refer to it as kind of your salary cap. I got this much to spend. If we're going to make this, and this is kind of where we're at, revenue wise, this is my salary cap. I can't really go over this. So what is that number? We are in that 35. We always kind of aim for that 25 to 40% mark. And yeah, that's excluding ownership. But same thing, then you can dive into rents, hey, this is more for not, I'm in a current spot. Like, am I overpaying? Yeah, you can kind of use this, but also this is more, especially if you want to start to grow. Hey, I'm going to have to charge this much because my rent's going to be this much. This is my price point. This is the model I have. What is that rent percentage? All this comes from our data metrics that we can track. Those are more parameters. I would say your rent's going to be fixed, and that's an easy one. But your payroll, especially, it's like, hey, well, I want to grow. I want to add 10K a month. Like, well, if you add 10K a month, how many more sessions am I going to have to add? How many more coaching hours will I have to add? Can I absorb that with my staff, or do I have to go find somebody else? Now I have to hire somebody else at, this compensation. Well, I'm that. So all that extra 10K a month is not going into my pocket. I need to pay to service that. And that's why like you never can stop growing as this stuff takes effect. So those are just a few more data points if we're going to go down the rabbit hole and get more advanced on this.
I feel like we might have an episode here, gents. I feel like this is a good starting point, kind of intro with some more advanced stuff to the scoreboard stuff. Connor, any closing thoughts on this?
No, I think this was a banger of an episode.
Banger.
That's what all the kids say.
Yeah. It slaps, I think, is also
Slaps.
a thing that the cool kids say. Bet. I don't know
Yes,
what that.
I if you listen to this all the way through, I can't reiterate enough. If you're not doing anything, start at the most basic level. Don't go over complex. Don't think it's the biggest thing in the world where it's the mountain's top is so high that why would I even get started? Start with the first step. Couple things.
And if you need help with it, guys, on a serious note, at Build Your Gympire, shoot us a DM. We'll shoot you a free copy of a basic scoreboard that you can use. And honestly, like that scoreboard can get you pretty stinking far. Like you can use that thing pretty deep into the lifetime of your business and still be totally okay. But we'll close it. Appreciate you guys for this one. I think you gave a ton of information, a ton of value to the listeners. Listeners, if you got value out of this, we'd love it if you left a really nice, awesome, fantastic review. Maybe shared it with a gym owner friend of yours. We'd appreciate the hell out of you. And that's all for now. See you in the next episode.